Nag Hammadi, Egypt, 1945. A group of farmers tilling their fields unearthed a clay jar. It contains more than 50 biblical scrolls dating back to the 3rd century AD, making them even older than the books of the so-called New Testament. Instead, these texts are supposedly first-hand accounts written by friends and followers of Jesus and were worshipped as fact by a relatively obscure group of ancient Christians known as the Gnostics.
Gnosticism comes from a direct oral tradition that is passed down from the early Christians and evolves separately from the institutionalized church. And there's the tradition that the Gnostics have teachings that come directly from Jesus through apostles, followers, even family who come from Jesus.
Gnostic comes from the word gnosis, which means a personal revelation and experience. And when we look at those texts today, we see secret learning, secret teachings.
Secret teachings directly from Jesus himself, passed down through his closest followers and potentially giving us a first-hand account of Jesus' life and deeds. One might think such gospels would be held in high regard by the church. But in fact, it was quite the opposite.
When I first encountered what I called the Gnostic Gospels, we were all surprised that there were so many Gospels that weren't in the New Testament.
The reason that a lot of these books didn't make it into the Bible is that they weren't congruent with the core message of the books that did make it in.
These texts were declared to be sort of full of errors and they'll lead you astray. One famous bishop calls them an abyss of madness and blasphemy against Christ. So these were the enemies of the early church, and Christians thought they must have horrible things in them.
The penalty for copying or even keeping any of the Gnostic texts would have been increasingly severe. It could have even led to more severe punishment like torture and death.
These lost books of the New Testament include a number of so-called Gospels, including the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of the Egyptians, and many others. But just what was it in these Gnostic texts that made many Bible scholars and clerics reject them as being not only too controversial, but too dangerous?
The Gospels of the New Testament all tell you how important Jesus is. Jesus is the Son of God, the Son of Man, the King of Israel, the Messiah. I mean, you name it, he's somebody very special. And he's not like you and me. Now, the Gospels of Thomas or Philip, they say something quite different. They say Jesus, yes, he may be speaking divine truth, but he's really like you and me.
But of all the Gnostic Gospels, there is one that many biblical scholars believe to be more significant and more controversial than the rest: the Gospel of Mary.
There's a lot of controversy about Mary Magdalene. In the Bible, she's portrayed a certain way. She's one of the followers of Jesus. Oftentimes, she's described as a prostitute, as one who Jesus kind of picked up from obscurity and made her one of his followers. But the Gospel of Mary, it specifically says that Jesus loved Mary more than the other disciples. In fact, they actually put that in the mouths of one of the disciples. So don't you know that he loved her more than us?
Although the actual author of this gospel is unknown and several pages of the original text have never been found, the text seems to reveal astonishing details about Mary Magdalene's relationship with Jesus. There are even those who are convinced that Mary was not only one of Jesus' most devoted followers, but also perhaps his lover, or even his wife.
Certainly, we discover in the Gnostic texts that there are many, many references to Jesus' relationship to Mary Magdalene. She is referred to as his beloved. She is referred to in a sexual manner in the Gnostic Gospels. So not only was Jesus married, but Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene. Because Jesus was a rabbi, it would have been required for Jesus to be married. If Jesus were not married, this would have been something that would have been remarked upon and talked about. And the fact that it is not is actually one of the things that proves that Jesus was married, because it would have been very normal for him to have been so.
Gnosticism was seen as a problem because there was a core belief that had to be maintained, that there were certain non-negotiable truths that were part of the Christian gospel. And so if anything was contradictory to that, then it needed to be suppressed or refuted.
So there is a lot of Gnostic material that tells us Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene. 2,000 years of church tradition is overturned by the Gnostic Gospels because Mary Magdalene emerges as a successor of Jesus.
Does the Bible continue to inspire billions of people around the world, not because of the answers it provides, but because of the questions it inspires us to ask? Questions about what many believe to be its inconsistencies and contradictions, questions about life and humankind's unique place in the universe, questions that may forever remain unexplained.